Hey there, Sooner football fans. This is the OU Insider YouTube channel, and this is Quick Slants. Typically on Tuesdays, we are reacting to, breaking down a Brent Venables press conference. There is no Brent Venables press conference this week. The Sooners' regular season is over. They await a bowl bid. All BYU had to do was hang on to an 18-point lead in Stillwater against Oklahoma State on Saturday, and the Sooners would have been playing in Arlington this coming weekend. Obviously, that did not happen. The Cougars choked it away. Oklahoma State wins that game in double overtime, and it will be them, not OU, that faces off with Texas for the Big 12 title. So, Jesse, there is one topic that OU fans are consumed with this week. And honestly, there wasn't a whole lot of belly aching over the outcome in Stillwater because it had kind of become apparent early last week that Jeff Lebby was a front runner for the Mississippi State job. Right around Thanksgiving, maybe Wednesday, Thursday, it became apparent that he was the front runner. Saturday night, his hiring was imminent. Sunday, it was official. He is off to New Mexico. Where did I get New Mexico? Mississippi State. He's off to Mississippi State to be their next head coach. He's been introduced, held his first press conference, all that good stuff. We're here on Tuesday, and Oklahoma's looking for a new offensive coordinator. But first things first, Jesse, I know you have a column coming on OUinsider.com about this very question, but I think it's an interesting one, and one amidst all the chaos of figuring out who the new offensive coordinator is going to be, a question that probably hasn't been asked and not discussed the way it ought to be discussed. How should OU fans remember Jeff Lebby's tenure as offensive coordinator?
I think it's a big question, and not just a question about looking back, but I also think it's a question that might get answered in the next few days, depending on how Brent Venables and this staff handles this OC search. But Parker, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts too, because I mean, I started digging through the numbers, like you mentioned, for a column I have coming later, hopefully today. It's an interesting thing to think about, because I think the word I kept coming back to is mixed. I think it should be a mixed reception, because you look at the stats, Parker. It's undoubtable. It's undeniable. Oklahoma's offense was one of the most explosive and high-powered offenses in the entire country, even the last 2 years, even the 6 and 7 season. You look at the explosive stats, you look at the yards per play stats, the scoring stats, the total offense stats. Jeff Lebby, by all accounts, had this offense running at a pretty high rate. I think the thing that makes it interesting, Parker, is it's not only just the on the field issues, whether that was issues with pace or late game situations, controlling the clock, things like that, but also it was kind of, especially this year, it was kind of weird, wasn't it, Parker? I mean, obviously the Art Briles stuff that happened at the beginning of the year, but then his weekly press conferences just got canceled, after the Cincinnati game, with there was really no explanation offered from the staff as to why that happened. And then, yeah, I think even going into the TCU game and the way that his departure has happened. I mean, he mentioned something on Twitter late last night in response to Brent Venables' comment, or Brent Venables' tweet about Jeff Lebby's tenure. But Parker, it all kind of felt weird the last few weeks. And I think it's one of those things that I think if Brent goes with an internal hire, or if he goes with an internal hire, I think, to me, that kind of signals that they want to keep doing some of the stuff that has been put in place by Jeff Lebby on the offensive side of the ball. If they go with an external hire, that seems to me like they would want to take some things in a new direction. So it's a question that we may not really be able to answer until the OC search is done. But for you, how I think it's an interesting question to ask, because
Yeah.
it's a weird thing. I don't know. How do you feel about it?
Yeah. Well, first off, I know we're going to get comments about it, so I want to acknowledge it. If you see me looking down at my phone, it's not because I'm bored with what Jesse is saying or not interested in what he is saying. It's because we're in the middle of an OC search and intel is flying in continuously. So I'm very much multitasking here. But look, Jesse, as I see it, as I look back on the 2 years of Jeff Lebby that Oklahoma got, I mean, it was objectively prolific offense, right? The Sooners were one of the most effective offenses in college football in each of his 2 seasons at the helm. Now, where they were undone was in year 1, it was poor defense, and you can argue that the pace with which the Sooners played offensively contributed to an overall fatigue with the defense that became very conspicuous in the second half of the season. So you can hold Lebby somewhat culpable there, certainly. And then in year two, it was the bizarre situational decisions, especially against Kansas and Oklahoma State, that led Lebby to fall out of favor with many of the fans. But look, the reason why Jeff Lebby is an SEC head coach today is because he's very good at his job. Was he perfect in Oklahoma? By no means. But I think for what the Sooners were trying to establish, the foundation that they were trying to lay, and Brent Venables did emphasize it on his first day, he wanted that program not to be one-dimensional, but to one day play elite offense and to play elite defense. I think Jeff Lebby's notable contributions were laying the foundation for success by being statistically prolific through 2 years, right? At this point, you can set that in front of recruits and say, okay, Jeff Lebby might be gone, but look at how many play callers we've had over the last 25 years. And how many times have you seen a legit downturn or a rough period, if you will, for Oklahoma on the offensive side of the ball? No, regardless of who the play caller has been, OU has been consistently elite in that department. So I think continuing the lineage of excellent offensive play is something that Jeff Lebby did accomplish in his 2 years. And also, he was instrumental in getting Jackson Arnold to campus. He was instrumental in getting Michael Hawkins committed to Oklahoma, and obviously Kevin Sperry as well. So the quarterback position is the most important position on the field. It's cliche, but it's true, Jesse. And Lebby was as integral as anybody in ensuring that for the next 5 years, at least, potentially beyond, Oklahoma has quarterbacks coming in every single year that are at the very least have the potential on film and on paper to be the future face of a national title contender. So the legacy that he leaves behind as far as recruiting is concerned, I would say, like, if you're an Oklahoma fan, say what you will about Jeff Lebby's play calling ability and the way that he ran his offense. What you can't knock him for is his evaluation and recruiting acumen at the quarterback position. And he has set Oklahoma up very well in that capacity in the years ahead. So that is something you certainly cannot take away from Lebby with regard to his 2 years at Oklahoma. Now, let's dig into this OC search, Jesse, because we've been posting updates continuously at OUinsider.com. If you're not a member over there, we're about to start a new 50% off special, I believe, here in the next couple of days so that you can stay apprised of the OC search. But it'll only cost you a few bucks a month. Go sign up over there, and you will remain up to date on all things pertinent to this coaching search and the eventual hire. But with regard to the timeline, Jesse, right now, it does seem like, as I reported this afternoon, kind of looks like this is going to get done pretty soon by the end of the week, I would say. And if that is the case, you would lean towards them keeping it internal and going external at that point, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I would. And kind of going with what we mentioned earlier, I think the internal candidate, for one, it makes a lot of sense because I think there's qualified guys internally that can do this job, that have experience as a head coach. They have Division I experience. And obviously, whether that's Matt Wells or Seth Luttrell or even someone like Joe John Finley, I think those are guys that deserve shots at an offensive coordinator job. And I think the thing that you always have to remember is to get experience being an offensive coordinator, you have to be an offensive coordinator first. But I think it makes sense not only to look internally for that. I think Brent Venables has always valued consistency. Not that he won't look outside the program, but I think he's always valued consistency. But to me, Parker, despite a lot of you can dive into the complexities of Jeff Lebby's, you can dive into what his tenure looked like. But to me, like you just said, the foundation is there. A lot of with the guys he's recruited, with the guys that are currently on the roster, it's very clear that the structure, that the blueprint is there for a high-powered offense. And I think it makes sense to bring somebody internally to continue that. Now, not that anybody internally wouldn't come up and make their own tweaks or maybe take some things in a new direction, but to me, I think the blueprint's there. The structure's there. and there are internal candidates to make that work. And like you mentioned, Parker, it's not only early signing day coming up, but the transfer portal opens in a few days. This OU still has the bowl game to do. I think in a lot of ways, they're still going to be thorough. I know they will, but to me, I think it's becoming more and more clear that an internal candidate is the likeliest possibility here.
Okay, so let's talk about that, because as we have reported at OUinsider.com, it looks like the two guys that are most likely to get the nod in that scenario, if it is internal, would be Seth Littrell, former North Texas head coach, most recently, who has been an offensive coordinator in the past, and one guy that has not yet been an offensive coordinator at any level, in any capacity, and Joe John Finley, the Sooners tight ends coach. So knowing what you know about those two guys and just kind of having a handle and a gauge on what direction makes sense for Oklahoma as far as the offensive philosophy moving into the SEC. I'll ask you straight up, who do you think is better for that position? Littrell, Finley, which way do you lean and why?
It's an interesting question because I think they both have their positives. I mean, both of them have connections to the University of Oklahoma, obviously. And then you look at, someone like Seth Littrell, who not only has a wealth of experience coaching at Division I programs and a variety of different roles. And as you mentioned, as a head coach at North Texas, he also has offensive coordinator experience. He's done it longer. He's been in the business longer. He has the ties to OU as a player, and obviously he's been an analyst for a little bit now. But then you look at someone like Joe John Finley, who obviously has been on the staff for a couple of years now. Obviously, he was a graduate assistant about a decade ago at Oklahoma. Obviously, he's been a bunch of different places, Missouri, Baylor, Texas A&M, Ole Miss, and he has direct experience working alongside Jeff Lebby and working, within Jeff Lebby's scheme. So to me, it's an interesting thing. Again, going back to, do you want to kind of continue the blueprint, which is what I think Joe John Finley offers, or do you maybe want to shake it up a little bit with someone like Seth Littrell? To me, and the thing that's hanging over all this too is obviously the SEC move, which makes it a little bit more riskier to hire somebody that doesn't have a ton of offensive coordinator experience like Joe John Finley. To me, I think if you're looking at the safest, wealth of experience option, to me, it's Seth Littrell. And to me, I think it makes sense to go from an analyst to an offensive coordinator position. You can't deny his roots in Oklahoma, the wealth of experience he has. That doesn't mean Joe John Finley wouldn't make a good offensive coordinator. Again, he has worked with Lebby and the blueprint is there. But to me, I think Seth Littrell maybe makes the most sense.
And going back to the conversation we were having a few minutes ago about how you evaluate Lebby's 2 seasons as Oklahoma's offensive coordinator and the things Oklahoma accomplished offensively, I think whatever your feelings may be on Lebby, that probably goes a long way towards dictating your perception of Joe John Finley as your future offensive coordinator, right? Like if you liked Lebby, you liked his offense, you liked the way that the Sooners were able to move the football, and you liked the tempo with which they played, that you're probably pretty open to the idea of Finley being the next OC at Oklahoma. If you didn't like Lebby, if you had beef with this system, you had beef with the tempo, and you weren't thrilled with some of the calls that he made, especially situationally, well, then you're probably not as keen on Joe John Finley becoming the next OC at Oklahoma. So I will say this, Jesse, and this is something that we have talked about quite a bit over at OUinsider.com amongst all of our other reporting on this search, is that I don't know how you make things jive with Seth Littrell and Joe John Finley on the same offensive staff, because Littrell has a history as a tight ends coach. He's coached running backs as well, but most recently in his career, he's a tight ends coach. Finley coaches tight ends right now. In losing Lebby, not only do you lose an offensive coordinator, but you lose a quarterbacks coach as well. So were you to promote Littrell to offensive coordinator, it begs the question, who is your quarterbacks coach? Because right now you have 10 of 11 on-field slots filled. You lost Lebby. He is the one vacancy. You promote Littrell, that's your 11th on-field coach, and you have nobody to coach quarterbacks. And so what you have to do at that point is you have to entrust the quarterback room to either Finley or Littrell, right? One coaches tight ends, one coaches quarterbacks. Neither of those guys have ever coached quarterbacks. So you have, once again, a star-studded quarterback room heading into the SEC. Jackson Arnold, Michael Hawkins, Brendan Zurbrugg, eventually Kevin Sperry. Are you doing those guys a disservice if you have, and look, Luttrell and Finley, as you said, both outstanding football minds, but being a good football coach and being a good quarterbacks coach aren't necessarily one and the same, right? So are you doing those guys a disservice if you have a first-time quarterbacks coach responsible for their oversight and development? I think you can make a strong case that the answer to that question is yes. So logistically speaking, I think it makes more sense to just promote Finley to OC, because then all you have to do is bring in a quarterbacks coach. But Brent Venables and Joe Castiglione, they know a whole lot more than I do. And if they're more confident in Seth Luttrell than Joe John Finley to be the Sooners offensive play caller going forward, they're going to figure it out from there, because that's not a hire that they're going to make with reservations. My worry is if you do promote Luttrell and you do have to figure out who your quarterbacks coach is, especially if that means passing over Finley as the play caller, maybe you do end up losing him to Mississippi State, which I know for a fact, like that's not what Finley wants, but it's also not something that he's completely closed off to. He would like to stay at OU, but that doesn't mean like he's a guarantee to stay at OU, if that makes sense. So it'll be interesting to see what develops here. And once again, we're keeping you guys updated every hour of the day over at OUinsider.com. This is a topic that no doubt we will address on the OU Insider live stream Wednesday night. Jesse and Brian will talk about it on the Oklahoma Drill podcast, and we'll touch on it on the Under the Visor podcast. So though the regular season may be over for Oklahoma, make no mistake, the coverage is not stopping. It is heating up. How does this staff shuffle impact recruiting? We've got you covered in that department. Sooner Hoops, they're 6-0. They're looking really, really good. Jesse and our guy Brody Lusk have you covered on all things Sooner Hoops over at OUinsider.com as well. So really good time to jump on board, become a member. And you, again, if you just missed out on our 75% off promo, hang tight. We should be launching another 50% off promo here shortly. So stay tuned. Definitely subscribe to this YouTube channel, because even if you don't subscribe over at OUinsider.com, which I recommend because you'll get a lot there that you won't get here, but easy way to just stay up to date on everything for at surface level would be to subscribe to this YouTube channel. Give us a thumbs up, comment down below. Who do you want to be the next OC at Oklahoma? Who makes sense in your eyes? We'd love to hear your feedback. And until we talk again on OU Insider Live on the Oklahoma Drill podcast, whatever video drops on this channel next, for Jesse Crittenden, I am Parker Thune. Y'all take it easy. And again, OUinsider.com is the place to be for all your scoopage on the OC search. We'll see you.